A small, persistent knock at an office door that has not been knocked on in years. The knock is hesitant, then urgent. A man's hand pauses over a pen. Outside, the hallway is a ribbon of glass and marble and muted conversations. Inside, a CEO in a suit that could buy a house stares at the heavy oak door as if he has forgotten what the world sounds like beyond his boardroom. He stands. He walks. He opens the door. A little girl stands on the threshold. She is 7, maybe 8. Her hair is in 2 uneven braids. Her shoes are scuffed. Her eyes are a business-class ticket to honest fear. She holds something in her hand, a folded slip of paper stained with dirt. She does not cry at first. She has practiced being small for a long time. "They hurt my mom," she says. "She's dying." For a breath, the CEO thinks the girl is missaying something. She blinks like someone who has just shouted a word into a canyon and waited for it to come back unchanged. The canyon answers with silence. The man is used to numbers. The girl is not a number. He says, "What did you say?" She repeats it with a steadiness that makes him want to both weep and hide. "They hurt my mom. She's dying." He looks past her to the corridor, to the polished floor that reflects a world that does not usually contain little girls and bruises and human things that tug at heartstrings. He looks back at her and sees, in a photograph-sharp pain of recognition, his own daughter at that age. He does not have a daughter. He had a daughter once, in another life, in another choice. He closes the door and kneels until his suit makes a small, ridiculous rustle. "What's your name?" he asks. "Lila," she says. She is not lonely for words, but for help. She sees the man kneel and immediately relaxes because adults forget how to be gentle when they're tall. She tells him where she lives. The address is 3 blocks away, 2 flights up in a building whose paint color used to be fashionable and now is tired. She tells him that her mom's name is Rosa. "Rosa," he says, and for reasons he cannot name, his throat tightens. He had known a Rosa once. An office plant had been named Rosa. A project. A promise. He stands up so quickly the chair topples. "Come with me," he says before he can ration charity into a boardroom-approved proposal. She nods and clutches the paper. On the way down the elevator, her small fingers curl around his cuff like a lifeline. The CEO looks at them, at the contrast of dark business watch against knuckles with scabs. He tells himself to do something sensible. He calls the assistant on the way down. The assistant says a dozen things about privacy and liability. He tells the assistant to stop talking. Outside, the city breathes steam and horns. A street vendor sells empanadas nearby. The world is noisy and indifferent. Lila leads him, quick-stepping as if the sidewalk might give way beneath them. They turn into a block where the corporate towers thin into a neighborhood of aging facades and laundry lines. A dog barks. A neighbor sweeps. Time moves differently here, like the beat of an old heart. They climb the stairs. They find Rosa on the narrow couch, faded blankets over her legs, a bruise like a map on her cheek. Her breathing is shallow. When she sees the man enter, her eyes open and hold on to him with the kind of gratitude that is postured by people who have lived through too much kindness. She smiles, and it is both fierce and fragile. He kneels, this time without the precaution of a suit. He explains that he is called Elias Carrington, CEO of Carrington Holdings. He expects the name to blur the air, to make things simpler, and yet the woman looks at him as if he has simply entered the room with a flashlight. She has important things to ask. How did he get their building? Who is going to feed Lila? Can she keep the small succulent in the window? Her voice is a ledger of pragmatics. Lila sits on the floor, close enough to touch her mother's hand. Her fingers trace the bruise. Rosa says it is nothing. The bruise says otherwise. "They hurt my mom," Lila says again, because it is the short sentence that explains everything. The man feels his hands go hot. He smells disinfectant and lemon and the faint curry of a neighbor's cooking. He asks what happened. Rosa closes her eyes and says that there are people who owe her money. They came looking. She made bad deals when she had hope and little choice. The men thought she had more than she had. She begged. They hurt her to scare her into paying. She couldn't pay. She has been ill for a while, she says. The illness is swelling in the silence. She coughs, and the couch seems to sigh with her. At the sound of cough and truth, the man remembers another cough, a different apartment, a different year. He remembers decisions he did not make. He remembers the sound of a doctor pronouncing rot on the other side of a desk that smelled of coffee and compromise. He thinks of numbers again and knows they are a cage. He wants to buy time like he buys companies. He is a man of capital. He is, in a way, currency personified. He feels suddenly and acutely inexperienced at being human. "We will get you help," he says. "We." His voice is steadier than his head feels. He reaches for his phone and calls an ambulance with the same ease he uses to acquire assets. But the ambulance is 2 blocks away, and the city is an old machine. It will not hurry for the poor the way his private jet used to. He calls his doctor. The doctor tells him to bring her in. The man thinks of hospital rooms with white walls and nurses who will not let a single child sleep in a waiting chair. Lila watches him as if watching a magician who might fail if he shows his trick. She trusts him not because of his name, but because he keeps his word and because she has nothing else. At the ER, the bright light washes their tired colors. Doctors move with choreography that saves lives and also makes the patient feel like a small, misfiled file. Rosa is admitted. Tests are run. The word sepsis gets whispered like a bad rumor. Someone mentions an infection. Someone else mentions negligence and abscess. The man sits in the plastic chairs and counts breaths like a man measuring interest rates. He cannot buy back all the chances that Rosa did not have. He can, however, buy the care she needs now. He signs whatever paper they push at him. He pays. He signs again. The bills multiply like weeds. He is used to paying larger sums for smaller things. Money is a tool that solves immediate friction. It does not, he knows now, solve the worn-out lines on a person's face. But it does buy antibiotics and a private room and time. On the third night, an attending nurse brings him coffee. She has a ring with chipped enamel and a permanent polite disinterest in the world. She says that hospitals patch bodies. They do not always patch the things that led to the body falling apart. She tells him that what Rosa needs is not only medicine but safety from the men who hurt her, and that the police are stretched thin and likely to suggest a restraining order as though that were armor. He sets an appointment with a detective. He meets an officer who has grown tired of cases that smell of desperation. The officer asks for evidence. Lila offers a scrap of paper with a name scrawled in a hurried hand. It is not much. The officer takes the scrap and blinks like someone who forgot their child at school. He says he will try. Elias Carrington is used to moving the world by announcing decisions. He is not used to being ignored by queues of bureaucracy that operate on time measured in forms. He is used to making a call and having results. Now, at a small hospital room, he sits with Lila and watches her color change with the same carefulness he once gave to startup pitches. He wonders if compassion can be scaled. He organizes 2 things the way he organizes everything: a plan and a budget. He starts with the plan. He hires a lawyer pro bono to help Rosa press charges and to secure Lila's custody should anything happen. He arranges for food, for social workers, for a nurse to come to the apartment when Rosa is discharged. He does what his training has taught him to do. He assembles people who can move faster than the institutions that are bogged down by rules. He visits Rosa daily. In between sleep and fever, she talks about a childhood that was full of music and mango trees and a man who loved her once. She speaks Spanish sometimes when the words in English get tired. He listens. He learns that Rosa had been a seamstress, that she used to make costumes for school plays, that she had saved coins in baby jars and once dreamed of opening a little shop. He pictures her at a sewing machine, laughing at a displaced button. On a slow afternoon, when the sun slants through the blinds and dust looks like stars, Rosa asks the man if he remembers the woman he once was. He is startled. He had expected her to ask for money or vengeance. She asks instead whether he believes in being good for the sake of being good. He says he used to believe in systems and returns and leverage. Now he believes in small things. He believes in listening. Rosa smiles with a bravery that is beautiful and very tired. She says that she wants Lila to have a chance to learn to sew because it helps to mend more than cloth. Elias thinks about the school in the neighborhood that offers after-school classes. He promises to pay for lessons and materials and a sewing machine when Rosa is better. The problem is the past. The men who hurt Rosa don't work in spotlighted roles. They are violent with the quiet huddle of those who fly under the radar. They believe a bruise is private and a debt is leverage. Elias attempts to trace the men through calls and threats and a detective with a slow calendar. He offers a reward. He hires a security consultant to install locks at the apartment and to check windows. He buys a cheap second phone to give Lila so she can call if something happens. He gives her an old voice recorder so she can capture names if she needs to. The nights are long. Rose's infection improves. Then she takes a turn for the worse. The doctors call it a setback. The man sets his jaw and refuses to leave her side. In the hospital kitchen, Lila confesses that the people who hurt her mom are also the reason they are behind on rent. She tells a story of men who came with promises and left with shoves. They took a little jewelry, then more. Then they threatened to make things harder if she didn't have the money. Lila's voice cracks, not from fear but exhaustion. She has been keeping a ledger in her head, counting the days as if salvation were a number. Elias sits with Lila in the hospital waiting room and watches her doodle address on paper with the free hand of a child who thinks in costumes. He sees the way she uses shapes to fix the world. He remembers a different kind of ledger, one where people were mere variables in a portfolio. Now the variables have names. As Rose's condition stabilizes, the detective calls with news. He has identified a man associated with several petty crimes, a collector with no scruples. The man has moved. They track him to a small warehouse on the edge of town. The police nudge. There is a confrontation. The man is arrested. He speaks like someone who thinks the world still owes him. He says he did not mean to hurt her. He meant to scare her. He shrugs as if pain is ephemeral. The arrest brings relief and a new set of challenges. Evidence is shredded. Rumors circulate. The men involved are part of a loose network that is hard to pin down. The police say it's progress, and also not enough. Rosa is safe enough to be discharged with an oxygen tank and a nurse scheduled for visits. The city says it's their job to fix things. The world says it is busy. Elias decides he will do more than patch. He will create a small fund for cases like Rosa's, for people who fall through the cracks of a system that works for the wealthy and moves slower for those who are not in the portfolios. He sets up a foundation. The foundation's name is sterile at first, then he changes it to something softer, Rosa's Thread. He pours money into it and does not expect the money to be the only answer. He uses it to fund medical outreach, legal aid, and sewing classes. He hires people who know how to listen better than lecturing. He asks Lila what she wants to learn. She says, without thinking, that she wants to make dresses that make people feel brave. Elias smiles and promises her a sewing machine. But medicine is not always grateful for the fixes of men who arrive late. Rosa's lungs are stubborn. They hold on long enough to teach and to stitch a few seams of a new life. And then they fade like curtains at the end of a play. Her last week is awake with memories and sleep with quiet fits. She makes Elias promise to take care of Lila if anything happens. She writes a short note with a finger that trembles. Teach her to sew. Teach her to be brave. On a morning when the light is a little too bright and yet not enough, Rosa's heart forgets to keep beating. The machine's beep slows down and then stops. The room is a small universe emptied. Lila is numb. Elias is a man who has just learned how to love in public. He holds Lila, and they both cry like people who have been given back an old grief and told to name it. The funeral is small. A line of people come. Neighbors, a nurse, a detective hesitant and sincere, some of Elias' team who remove their tailored coats as offerings of humility. They bring a simple wooden box with nails and a violin. Lila sits on Elias' lap, while the violin plays like a wind that remembers someone it loved. They bury Rosa under a tree that will grow new leaves, and Lila lets go of a handful of dirt like it is a promise. Afterwards, people go back to their routines. The city hums with its appetite for industry, but small ripples persist. Rosa's Thread opens its doors in a thrifted office space. It is not a glossy nonprofit with a marble staircase. It is a room with mismatched chairs and sunlight, and a sewing corner with donated machines. Elias attends the opening in jeans and a shirt and no tie. He knows his gestures cannot undo the past, but he wants the future to be less cruel. Lila becomes a regular. She learns to thread a needle, to measure a hem with the precision of someone who knows the value of exactness. She learns that mending is both a craft and a language. She learns to make dresses that look like armor, with pockets for courage and linings sewn with jokes. Children come to classes. A woman who used to work nights brings coffee that tastes like home. The detective drops by sometimes to drop off paperwork and always brings a chocolate bar for Lila, who calls him senior detective and asks him about evidence, as if evidence were a bedtime story. Elias sits in the back and listens. He funds counseling for people who need someone to talk to after being hit by a world that did not care. He funds microgrants for sewing machines and rent relief. He hires a caseworker named Marisol who has a laugh that unknots tension like an untied knot. She keeps track of the money and also holds the stories in a notebook with page corners folded. The foundation grows like a small plant in a pot. It does not explode into global headlines. It does not pretend to save everything. It saves what it can. Months pass. Lila grows. She learns to embroider a little rose and always puts it on the inside of every dress she makes. People who come into Rosa's thread for stitches leave with more. They get a phone call back when someone from the foundation checks on them. They get to talk about fear until fear seems less permanent. Elias begins to change. He attends board meetings and thinks less about quarterly returns and more about sustainable care. He installs a sliding scale for contractors who want to attend sewing classes. He tells his executives that value cannot always be expressed in cash flows. Some of them laugh politely and keep their spreadsheets. Some of them watch and learn and later help arrange donations from other companies. The world shifts a degree. One evening, as autumn trims the trees and lights in windows look like 1,000 small fires, Lila and Elias sit at the sewing corner. Lila is threading a needle like a practiced monk. Elias watches, fascinated by the patience it takes to pass a single thread through. She looks at him, those big steady eyes full of a shy authority. "Do you miss her?" she asks. It is a child's way to ask an adult whether they will be poor company forever. He answers honestly. "More than I thought I could," he says. "But she taught me how to be small in a way that made space for other small things." He does not say that he had been small his whole life, but had hidden it behind numbers. He does not say that the thing that had been missing from his boardroom was a girl with scuffed shoes and a paper with a name on it. Lila nods like someone who has just confirmed a map. She asks if Rosa is proud of them. He thinks of Rosa's fingers, the last note, the way she asked him to teach the child to sew. He says, "Yes, I think she is proud." Years fold like fabric. Lila grows into a young woman with a seamstress's hands and a city's stubborn smile. She wins a small prize at a local design show for a dress that has a hidden pocket lined with a patchwork of love notes and receipts and names of people who helped. She reads the list of names aloud on a stage, and the audience leans forward like a flock listening for rain. She says the dress is called Rosa's dress. People clap politely, and then more. It becomes one of those small triumphs that means a lot to the city. Elias watches from the side, older in a way that no suit can disguise. He has taught the company to fund community programs. He still signs checks, but now he signs them for things that are softer. He goes to board meetings equipped with reports and with stories. Sometimes his COO rolls his eyes and then later surprises him by attending a sewing class and leaving with a small knitted hat that he wears at his child's soccer game. At the center of everything remains a memory. Rosa is a presence that is quiet and large. Her death did not become a cautionary tale, it became a seed. Lila continues to put the little embroidered rose on every dress she makes. People begin to ask why. She tells them about a woman who taught her to mend and to be brave and to always check a neighbor's windows at night. The story spreads in a way that is not loud but persistent. One day, a woman knocks on the door of Rosa's thread. She is 2 years older than Rosa would have been. She has a small child and a bag full of clothes that need mending. She sits down and says quietly that she was saved by a stranger once and wants to help someone else now. She asks whether she can volunteer. Lila looks at Elias and Elias looks at Lila. And in that instant, they both know that something has been completed and also begun. They both nod. The woman folds the clothes and begins to sew. Late at night, after the machines are quiet, Elias walks the block where he had first met Lila. He stands under the streetlight and thinks of a knock and a sentence that had the force of a fist. "They hurt my mom. She's dying." He remembers the shock and the tangle of what-ifs. He thinks of all the decisions he had made before and all the ones he still had to make. He thinks of Rosa's last note and the way a promise can be small and radical at once. He reaches into his coat and pulls out a scrap of paper folded into a thin square. It is the same note that Rosa had clutched at the hospital the last night she was awake. He had kept it in his wallet like a talisman. He reads the words again. "Teach her to sew. Teach her to be brave." He folds the paper and slides it back into his wallet. He looks up at the dark sky and is surprised by the softness of the stars. He knows he will never be able to give back what time took, but he has learned to measure the value of action in ways he could not before. He will keep sowing, in a metaphorical sense and in the literal one, and he will teach others to do the same. In the city, 1,000 small acts accumulate. People mend clothes, fix a neighbor's light, leave a note on a door about a food bank. Rose's thread does not change the world overnight. It chips away at coldness like a steady, patient sculptor. Lila grows older and teaches, and one evening she looks at a class of children and says that courage is sometimes as simple as showing up. When she says it, she means it. She remembers how she knocked on a door and said the words that would change lives. She remembers the way someone looked at her and saw not a problem, but a person. She remembers the way Rose's hands once trembled and then learned to make a perfect seam. Years later, Elias dies in a small, dignified way, not from tragedy but from age and a heart that was tired at last. At his funeral, people tell stories about ledgers and margins and spreadsheets. But they also tell stories about a man who had learned to measure his life by the number of people he had helped. They tell a story about the little girl who knocked and the woman who sewed, and the way a promise became a legacy. Lila stands by the tree where Rosa rests. She places a dress on the grave, folded with a little rose sewn into the lining. She thinks of the beginning and the end and the space between where life is mended and unstitched and mended again. She smiles, not the hollow smile of closure, but the quiet one of someone who has been entrusted. You can't unmake what hurt you, she says to the wind, but you can make something else in its place. Someone in the crowd, Marisol, the nurse, maybe one of Elias's executives, catches the phrase and repeats it. Others nod. The phrase becomes a kind of prayer and also a mission statement. It hangs, simple and resolute, over Rose's thread where the machines hum and the children learn. In the end, the bad men remain a part of the city's underbelly. They are arrested or they are not. The legal record is a messy thing. But there is a new tide. People who teach others to stitch courage into their linings, who provide legal aid without fanfare, who bring food to apartments where refrigerators are half empty. The world is still complicated, but the small light of human decency spreads, stubborn and unglamorous. Some nights, Lila sits at the sewing corner and talks to Rosa as if to someone who is listening. She tells her about dresses and small triumphs and about a man who had once been all numbers and learned, in the end, to be counted by kindness. In the lamplight, she sews another tiny rose into the corner of a dress. It is an act of remembrance and of hope. They hurt my mom, she had said to a stranger on a door. The stranger had stared in shock and then, slowly, had come to his knees and learned something that no spreadsheet could have taught him. In a city of indifferent noise, that kneeling had echoed. It had stitched a seam through the noise and kept a small family alive. And when the world seemed too harsh, a dress with a rose on the inside could still make a person feel brave.